Well, I think we're seeing and witnessing right now profound change. Possibly, history might say in years to come more significant change than even the Industrial Revolution or Gutenberg's introduction of the printing press itself. By that I mean a dramatic shift in largely driven by technology, in giving the consumer the ability to be the publisher as well as the receiver of information. And I think there's clear evidence already that the average person wants that level of engagement, wants to join the conversation, wants to be a purveyor and a curator of what is going on, as much as a recipient of that information. So I think you're seeing dramatic shifts in consumer behaviour, and as a consequence the media landscape has to be affected by that, and the way we think about or traditional notions of media owners and those businesses have logically got to change as a consequence. Well, I think we're seeing clear evidence around the world, and I'd have to say now also in Australia, the inevitability of the diminishment of the printed medium. Do I think that newspapers and magazines are going to disappear? No, absolutely not. In fact, I'd argue and assert that as long as we have an audience of people that have leisure time on their hands, there's clear evidence that correlates with higher print consumption. So in other words, the retirees, the boomer population generally, I think, will continue to want to consume printed matter for years to come. But I think we're clearly also seeing that for people on the move, people who are busy and time poor, digital devices, across the whole landscape. And by digital devices I mean smartphones, tablets, PCs, smart TVs, and so on and so forth, will become the de facto distribution platforms. But I think the subtle but really important change that is occurring is that these technologies enable people to interact with the media to a degree that's never been previously possible. And I think that we've clearly got an abundance of evidence already that people want to vote, they want to let their voice be heard, they want to forward on and pass and like and dislike and interact with what we produce and what we generate to a greater degree than ever before. So I think that Fairfax will clearly have to modify itself and continue to work towards providing the consumer with those opportunities to interact with us. I think the introduction since the mid-90s of the web has clearly accelerated this sense of us being a member of a global community. I mean, there's no real time lapse or time advantage anywhere in the world now. We are living in a very dynamic, real-time world where anything that happens, anything that occurs is reported almost immediately and instantaneously. So there's no disadvantage or advantage to where you live any longer. To that degree, I think we're better informed than we've ever been before. And to that degree, I think that there's far less opportunity for intervention around news and information. So stories as they emerge and break are immediately delivered to all corners of the world. Therefore, we are clearly better informed and more aware, I think, of global issues, global events. And certainly there is no lapse at all now in terms of the time that it takes to disseminate that information. But conversely, and on the other hand, you might also argue that at that same time we are more interested in the community, the immediate macro community in which we live, to a greater extent possibly than we have been for many, many years. And there's a lot of evidence that would seem to suggest that people are just as interested in what is going on at the very end of their street. Who is controlling their local council? What are the decisions that are being made around that will affect schools, hospitals, and community amenities? How good are the schools performing in the area in which I live? What plans are there to either increase or decrease parkland, etc., etc. I get a sense that we have got this, on the one hand, this great ability to be global citizens, but we're at the same time acutely interested in what is going on our very doorstep. It's the space in between, I think, that has become a little bit more blurred and perhaps less relevant to people. And by that I mean, I don't think we have as strong a sense of regional identity as perhaps we once did. I would assert that from a media perspective, it is that hyperlocal or global perspective that is now dominating the landscape. I'm a great believer that the consumer is king, and that ultimately the consumer will dictate what we feel the need to create to satisfy that consumer. To that end, I think we do have two very clearly and distinctive businesses that serve both those interests. I mean, I would like to think The Age plays a role, albeit a metropolitan daily newspaper based in Australia. It has a very strong investment in the dissemination and distribution of global news. If that weren't the case, we wouldn't have bureaus and correspondents dotted all around the world. But on the other hand, we also own and operate a very, very large network of community publications that tap into that really hyper-local experience that I've alluded to as well. So I think we're well positioned to serve both those sort of polar extremes, if you will. And I think that going forward, the hyper-local community piece of our business is going to become increasingly important. And I've been fortunate enough to work under many different leaders over a long career, some good, some not so good. Let's focus on the ones that were good. The most important lesson I learned early on was someone who had me under his wing said to me, don't ever ask somebody to do something that you're not either willing, able, or prepared to do yourself. In other words, don't just sit on the horse directing the troops into certain death in battle, but lead from the front, sword drawn. And I think that's a really good lesson for all leaders, which is you can't realistically expect people to follow your example if you're not leading by example. So I would strongly urge all leaders that work with me or for me to think really hard about what symbols they're sending out, what signals they're sending out around that sort of leadership style. I think that's really important. The other thing I think that is crucially important in a really effective leadership, and everyone talks a lot about this, but it's so true, is communication. Ultimately, you can be a brilliant strategist, you can have wonderful, innovative thinking, but if you haven't the ability to impart those messages effectively and communicate the story or the vision or the journey on which you're about to embark in a compelling and powerful way to your people, they're less likely to come on that journey with you. I think communication is probably 90% of effective leadership, as well as leading by example. I think anything that can encourage and sponsor excellence in any field is to be sort of applauded. I think in the case of leadership, Victoria, there is clear evidence to me that the leadership for Victorian movement as a whole has produced some outstanding leaders over the last decade or so, and I think anything we can do to both recognise and applaud that, but also to help support it at a grassroots level, is a really important thing to do. We like to think of ourselves as being involved and good corporate citizens, not just within Melbourne, but Victoria, and also more broadly within Australia. But I think that we've certainly seen the benefits of putting some of our own people through the programs, and anything that can help raise the standards in future generations of leaders is a really good thing as far as we're concerned.